Welcome to the Spaghetti Wall podcast, where we dive into life.
Both the messy parts and the moments of joy, and everything in between. I'm Jason Wilcox, licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Dr. Thaen Lee, a licensed clinical psychologist.
So today's topic is I think a really important topic to go over because there's a lot of people out there that I hear about or I work with where they don't know how to define abuse in a relationship. I mean, they know the things like someone literally hitting them and domestic violence. A lot of people understand that one, but they don't understand what the full gamut of abuse is. So today we're going to talk about abuse inside of relationships.
I think this is a great topic in having some clarity on defining, and it is quite complex because some abuse can't be seen, like a bruise or a black eye.
Yeah, exactly. I was watching a show recently on Netflix that I think it's called like Worst Exes or something, where these exes abuse or murder or kill people. And it's so interesting to me how in the beginning of each episode, normally someone will say something like, they hit me or they called me these bad names or they yelled at me. And I stayed with them because I loved them. And some of the times, I think it was the last episode, one of them was talking about how they didn't see it as abuse. They had to learn later that that's what abuse is.
It is a complicated topic, and I do want to be very careful as how we describe things here. Like, for example, I can tell you I grew up in a household where my parents yelled at each other all the time and they fought all the time and they had very mean things to say to each other. And I thought that was normal. I didn't know that was abuse or domestic violence.
Right. So would you define that as abuse now?
I would say, yeah. I mean, to put your partner down, to say disparaging things about your partner, to call them names, to intimidate. Yeah, I would say that's abuse.
Correct. Right. That is emotional and mental verbal abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the part like I've seen with multiple clients over the years who will start describing these things that their partner's doing them, that their partner's calling them names, their partner's yelling at them, their partner's putting them down, right? These things are all controlling. They're all forms of abuse. And it's interesting how many times I've had to have some, frank conversations with clients where we define it and I help them identify that, yes, that is abuse. And it often surprises them that would be abuse, to be called names, to be sworn at. Yeah, and I want to clarify something. Just because someone does this behavior, right? Like there they are, they yell at you and they swear, is that abusive behavior? Yes. Does that mean your partner is this hugely abusive person? Well, abuse and abuser might be two different things.
Yeah, I think we have talked about this outside of the podcast in the sense that maybe this person's partner is reacting emotionally, and this is just like how they cope with situations, and this is how they learn to like blow off steam. And once you name the behavior and you talk about it, they are able to go, oh, let me learn a different way to react to my partner. Then, yes, that's not, this person wasn't intending to respond that way, but this is how they react. And so it's a learned behavior. It's a coping mechanism. Does that mean they're an abuser? Probably not. If they're able to go, oh, wow, I see what you're saying. And yeah, we're bringing it up in couples therapy, or I'm working on it with my individual therapist. I do want to change the behavior and I can see what's wrong with it. So yeah, I think we're like distinguishing, like, does this make someone an abuser or does this mean they are being abusive, separating the behavior from the person and also assessing if this person can have the capacity to pause and go, wow, I can see what you're saying and I can hear that out and I'm willing to learn a different way to speak.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great distinction you're putting in there is understanding the difference between someone yelling and swearing at you, right, is abusive. End of story, period. It's abusive. And seeing that if this is a reactionary state, somebody doesn't know how to cope with the intensity of what's happening internally, and it comes out in this behavior, this person may not be necessarily an abuser, but it's still abusive.
Hmm.
And no matter what, at the end of the day, that's an important conversation to have, because nobody deserves to be abused.
Right. So, how do you address this particular distinction when in your couples therapy, Jason, one partner is saying, like, my spouse is abusive?
I don't know if I've ever had anyone come to a couple session and say my partner is abusive. What I have had is people come to the session and be like, yeah, they'll yell at me and swear at me and call me names. And then I'll just label that. I'll just say, yeah, that's abusive behavior. And it normally surprises the other person. They get like their eyes go wide, like, holy crap, they just said I'm abusive. But it is. And we'll just talk about it frankly of it's abusive behavior. It needs to stop. And if you're at a state right now where you don't have the skills to stop it, then it's important to understand how to have boundaries in a relationship of saying, so like if I started yelling at you, Tan, or swearing, it would be important for you to be like, Jason, we're stopping right here. Like, I'm pausing this conversation. We need to step away from each other. It's important to have boundaries in place and recognize that that needs to stop. Someone that might have done abusive behavior but isn't going down the road of this huge abuser, they're normally going to be able to take these cues, and they're going to be able to be like, yeah, fine, right? Like, let's stop and try to disengage. But that's what you're wanting to do until you build the skills. But it's important that anybody that, if they're reactive and it's creating abusive behavior, they really need to seek some help. And otherwise, it's just going to continue.
Yeah. Thank you for that example, Jason. I'm thinking more about these covert abusive, and maybe I'm trying really hard not to use the word abuse so that we can find other words, so like thinking about more covert coercive control, like a lot of times control and manipulation can come or be masked in the form of care, right? So I see this where partners are like, oh, well, text me when you get here. Where are you at? And it becomes more and more persistent of, I need to know where you are all the time because I need to know you're safe because I care so much about you. And really, it's control.
I think it'd be important to make a distinction there, though, because it's one thing for a partner to be like, oh, text me when you get there. Oh, text me when you're going to head out, versus, oh, text me when you get there. Oh, you didn't text me. How dare you not text me, and blow up at them, right? Like, it's a controlling behavior that this has to happen or you're going to be in trouble. So you're in fear that you have to be texting, you have to be communicating, you have to do all these things, or your partner's going to be blowing up at you. That's abusive, versus just someone that is really truly caring of just, oh, I just want to know when you get there. Could you let me know? Oh, I forgot. Oh, no worries. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not
Yeah. It's not, there's not an emotional intimidation
right.
or consequence to it. And a lot of clients I work with who have experienced intimate partner violence or domestic violence or abuse is that sometimes they're not even aware that their body's in that state of fear and fright. And so a lot of times I do just say, hey, when this is happening, what is your body doing and telling you, right? So a lot of times they are learning and discovering through therapy that I'm really tense when I'm around this person. Like I feel on edge when I'm around this person. And so a lot of times, even if we don't talk about the behavior, I ask them, how is your body responding to some of these behaviors and the way you're being treated? And that's a really big indicator for them.
Yeah, I think for me, listening to what you're saying, for the most part, that works. Just always be careful for those that get triggered. So, like, let's say there's a partner who's like, oh, text me when you get there. And someone's gone through an abusive relationship. So this triggers them, right? And they're like, oh, and have a reaction in their body. But the partner was really just caring. There's no consequence to it. There's no control there. It's just they love their partner and want to know they got there safe. I would consider or encourage taking one extra step if you do have that reaction and you're not clear, of just saying, I'm going to try my best, but it's okay if I forget, right? Or something
Mhm.
like that. And if your
Mhm.
partner goes, oh, yeah, yeah, of course, right? We're not talking about abuse anymore. We're talking about someone who really cares.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, and the way I work with trauma in therapy and relationships that have been abusive is, yeah, having that distinction of like what is happening now, right? So, we're still doing reality testing and working through what's come up for you in the past, right? So, yeah, it's of course, it's not taking on your past and projecting it onto this present person.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
would just be
Great
careful of
point.
that.
Great
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, but the body can tell you a lot. And so it's a really great point as well that you're bringing up of what is happening internally because your body's going to give you some warning signs and signals that wait, something's not right here.
Yeah, something's not right, but as you're saying, like, is this current situation that's making me feel that this way? And sometimes things feel compounded, right? So it's like if you have complex trauma, if you've been in multiple relationships with people who have created fear and intimidation in you, then absolutely that's going to be more intense and it's going to feel more intense in your body because you've been exposed to it more times.
Hmm. So I think what you're kind of overarching talking about when you went into this part of the conversation was about the kind of hidden control that people do that starts moving into this emotional abusive arena.
Yeah, I think I had two-prong approach to the things that are hidden, right? So more covert aspects of abuse. So yeah, the masking control as care, and that sometimes as a practitioner, I know as a therapist that people aren't aware of their own body responses and become dissociative or numb to abuse. So I was bringing up the body and the somatics of feel what your body's telling you. Are you heightened? Are you scared? Or is your nervous system activated? So, yeah, I think that's just another way of tracking, like as a therapist and as someone who assess for nervous system activation, as someone who assess where is my client at when they're talking about this event and how am I going to support them through processing this in their body and their mind.
Yeah. So I think overall, our first big message is kind of understanding what are the signs and symptoms. What is abuse really? And I think it's important for our audience to understand these things. So if it's not clear at this point, getting yelled at's abusive, getting sworn at's abusive, getting called names is abusive. People that emotionally try to manipulate you is abusive, right? In other words, they try to get you to control you to do the things they want you to do and operate the way they want you to operate, or there's an emotional toll that's going to come if you don't. Those things all fall under the abuse category, right? And most everybody knows anything that's physical is abusive. So if they hurt you, if they force you into a sexual situation that you did not agree to or want, right? Like those things are all abusive.
Yeah, if they throw things at you, if
Throw
they
things.
lock you up, if
Yeah.
they
Yes.
prevent you from going somewhere, if they threaten your life, yeah, all of those.
Yeah, and I think it's important to once you understand these things, it's okay if your partner does one of these behaviors just to call it out and say, "Look, that's abusive. I don't like it. Don't do that, please." And if it happens more than once, to be starting to put some boundaries down, saying, "Look, I don't want this in a relationship. I'm going to ask you to get some help around it. If you go to do that, I'm going to stop you." Right? And if they can't take these kinds of cues, if someone can't stop, that's a really, really concerning thing that they're showing you.
Yeah, and I mean, as we talk about the topic of abuse, I think people are familiar with the cycle of abuse that usually there's a honeymoon stage. And so people do stay because they cycle through times where this person is so sweet and so loving and so caring and so giving. And then something switches. And I have clients who told me, I was with this person for 15 years because I think they knew exactly how much I could take, and then they'll be good again and we'll be happy again. And then it starts again. The abuse starts again. And then they just get me to the point where I'm about to leave, or they're making a plan, talking to people, and then they're good again and they make these promises and I believe them. And so it is a very complex situation that people find themselves in because, it becomes a cycle, and people do stay because they believe this person will change. They have had good experiences with them. They truly believe this person cares about them. And so in moments of abuse, I think survivors and people who gone through it, they go, oh well, there's going to be a period where this stops, and then I can be okay for a little bit, and then we keep going the same.
Hmm. Yeah, so I think there's some things to think about in there for anyone that finds themselves in that situation. At least thoughts that I have. The first one I think of is people that say, "Well, I love them." Right? That show I was watching, it was a constant theme. I stayed because I love them. This is kind of a hard truth that I'm going to say, that that's a choice. It's really important to understand that's a choice. There's many people out there that you can fall in love with, and there's many people out there that would love you, that won't abuse you, that won't cause harm to you, that will treat you nice and kind. So it's a choice. It's a choice. You're sitting there saying that, okay, because I have feelings for this person, therefore I'm going to stay with these things happening. So it'd be important that you look at your choosing versus a reaction that you're going, well, my heart throbs for this person. Well, cool. Well, there's a lot of other people you'll feel that feeling with. So if that's what you're choosing, okay. But if you can show your brain that you're making this choice, that it is a choice, it can help you see, do you want this choice then? The second thing I would throw out there is our brains are kind of funny. They project a lot. Like we've talked in other episodes about negative core beliefs will project, but our brain also projects what we want to see in life. So when we meet somebody and we love them, we start projecting what we want them to be, or who we believe they will be, or the best version of them we've ever met is who they quote unquote really are. And that's not reality. Reality is when someone shows you the whole of them, that's who they are. So the ugly side, the good side, the middle side, the boring side, the happy, all those things, that is them, the whole of it. It's really important to look at the whole and go, is this what I want? Not, oh, the person that they can become is what I want. Oh, the person they were on that wonderful honeymoon I had is the one I want. No, no, no. The whole of them they've shown you. Is that who you want? Is that the person you want to be in love with? The person you want them to have this relationship? If not, if the only thing you go is, no, I don't really want the whole of them, but I love them, you're making a choice. And the choice is that what you're experiencing is more than likely going to be what's going to continue.
Yeah, great point, Jason. I think going back to negative core beliefs, for me, the way I work with them and with my clients is looking at, like, when you think about this person, what is the fear that keeps you, in the relationship? And a lot of the negative core belief is like, well, I don't think I can find anyone better. Well, I don't think anyone would love me. They told me that no one would love me, right? And so just looking at and working with the individual on what's coming up for them, what are some barriers for them to leave? What is the fear under, wanting to leave but not being able to leave? And some of it is highly tied to these negative core
Mm-hmm.
beliefs that no one else would love me. I won't find anyone better. Oh, well, it's not that bad, so they really minimize the abuse because something in their brain has told them that this is the best they can get. And so a lot of times I'm working with individuals on that negative core belief. And a lot of times what you're saying, Jason, is seeing that it is a choice. It may be a hard pill to swallow, but it opens the door for my clients to see that they do have choice and options, and what are other options if they were to imagine them.
Yeah. I think there's something really important with what you just said, though, that goes past the choice part, is when people really get ingrained and are in these relationships for a long time, that cycle of abuse you were talking about earlier, because for anyone that doesn't know what that is, cycle of abuse is basically someone that's an abuser. They'll treat you amazing and it feels so good and you'll feel so loved and you'll love them and life just seems like it couldn't be better. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, a hurricane comes and they treat you like garbage. They're tearing you down, they're dismissing you, emotionally abusing you, could go to the point of physical abuse or sexual abuse, right? Like it could go all kinds of different directions, but it's going to come and it's going to hit and it's going to be hard. It's going to hurt like crazy. And what happens is when this happens, because they'll switch back to the, oh my gosh, you're so amazing and treat you so beautiful, they start conditioning the brain to do everything it can to get back to that other state when the abuse comes. So your brain starts learning behaviors to figure out how to like literally take emotional responsibility for this other person. And it starts doing things like, what do I have to do to make them feel okay in this relationship? And you'll start taking blame. You'll start seeing you as the problem and the reason that you need to do something different for this partner, for them to not be doing these bad things to you. And what the problem here is once the brain starts getting conditioned like this, it starts being very difficult to see that you have a choice in this. And it starts becoming this situation where they've isolated you normally. They've cut you off from everybody around because they've torn everyone else down somehow, made you feel like you have to only be there. Then on top of that, they've torn you down so much that you feel like you're this nobody and there's nothing out there in the world that you can't be anything, right? And so you have to stay in this relationship. But they start doing all these things to tear you down to get you to feel like this is the only it.
So this reminds me of a guy I was dating, and I've never been called a name or be put down before in this way. It was really interesting. So he had called me a bitch. He had told me that I was such a bitch because I was putting him down because he didn't have a college degree and because I have a doctorate degree, that I was talking to him like he was dumb and that I'm a bitch and I'm so mean and degrading. It was weird. It was like a mind fuck for me because I was like, I don't speak to you that way. I don't think I've been mean to you, but it was like just the way it was coming out, it confused me and it like disorientated me. And in his yelling, I just remember I was like curled up with my knees to my chest on the floor, and I just put my hand to my ear and I was like, I can't listen to this and this feels really violent, you know. And so sometimes it's not putting you down. Sometimes it's accusing you of being someone you're not and making it about, yeah, me needing to convince him that he is smart, me needing to convince him that he can use big words. And I was so confused. I'm like, how else do I need to talk to you? I'm just talking to you like I'm talking to a regular person. I'm not dumbing down my words, you know? And so it was a really interesting way that he had used that on me. And I was just like, wow, that was a mind fuck.
Right. Because the goal there would have been, whether intentionally or not, would be to control you, to get you to stop acting intelligent, to get you to mouse up so that he can feel powerful and smart, right? Which is, again, controlling and abusive.
Yeah. So just wanted to give an example.
So I think kind of concluding all this, one of the biggest messages that we already said at the beginning is understanding what abuse looks like. Because I just meet so many different people that go, wait, name calling isn't normal in a relationship? No, that's abusive. Getting yelled at all the time isn't no, that's abusive. Getting manipulated and emotionally abused, where they're gaslighting you and tearing you down in different ways to make it so you can't just be you, yeah, that's abusive. All those things are abusive. Those are not healthy things happening in relationships if that's happening. Secondly, is what do you do about it? So if you're in a domestic violence situation, I would say get help, get out of there, get to safety, first off and foremost. There's domestic violence hotlines that you can call. I would really encourage you to call them. But if you're earlier in a relationship, or you're in a relationship where it only escalates to yelling and swearing or name calling, things like that, I would encourage you to call it out and just be like, hey, look, these things are abusive traits, and it's abusive to me for you to do those things. And I'm asking you to stop. I'm asking you to get help so that this stops. And going forward, if you start doing that, I'm going to say stop, or I'm going to walk away, because I don't deserve to be yelled at, called names, or sworn at.
Right. I think you're giving really good tools and tips here in that we're just identifying the behavior, and a lot of times it's around communication and setting boundaries and limits and being able to be assertive, because most people, they keep quiet because there's so much shame around sharing some of these difficulties that show up in relationships. And so, yeah, I think just speaking out, sharing, telling a friend that, hey, this happened. I don't know how I feel about it. Because being quiet about it and not talking about it does not lead to finding safety or help.
No. And I've heard this one many times over the years from clients that are in these kinds of situations. They'll say things like, oh, no way could I ever talk about it. And that's big in and of itself, that you feel like you cannot address a behavior that's abusive towards you. That's really unhealthy. It's important to be able to have these kind of conversations. Even if they're going to get upset, it's important to be able to have a boundary around it, going, yeah, this isn't okay. Okay, you're upset right now. I'm going to stop this conversation and we will pick it up, because I don't want to be treated like this. It's not okay. It's not healthy, and it's abusive.
I tell my clients, notice how you're trying to protect this person's image by not sharing about the abuse with friends or family. Notice, your fear around what would happen. And sometimes the abuser would say, why would you air out our dirty laundry? Why would you share, what's going on with us to other people? That's so embarrassing, right? They'll use ways to make you feel like you shouldn't be sharing what's happening.
And if that is one that you do struggle with, if you're like, yeah, but I don't want my family and friends involved because they'll cause more problems, this is where you really want to reach out to at least a professional. At minimum, reach out to a professional and talk to them. Even if you're like, man, I don't even know. I feel horrible about these things, but maybe I'm just making it all up in my head, and this is nothing. Well, call the domestic violence hotline. I mean, there's no harm or foul there. You're just going to call them up, say, hey, these things are happening. And they might give you some great resources and talk to you about it, right? Like, reach out to a professional somewhere, somehow, and at least just open up and talk about what's going on, because the more you keep it secret, the more power you give it.
Exactly. So, great advice.
Again, if you are in an abusive situation, please reach out to a professional. If you're in a domestic violence situation, reach out to domestic violence hotline. Get safe. Be safe out there.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. Hopefully, you guys got something out of today's talk.
And if you have any other topics for us, please always reach out. Check us out on our social media sites. We also have our couples training videos that are on our website, avidcounseling.org, if you're ever interested. Thanks for listening.